Emily Nolan, welcome to the Mom Curious podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
You do have quite an impressive page online that I got to check out about being an allergy mom and advocate. And I would just love for you to introduce yourself and let the listener know who you are, etc.
Absolutely. So, my last life, which is prior to having children, right? I did all of these other ventures, and I modeled for a while. I had some career in nutrition and in yoga, and I had this really fun, crazy yoga event called Topless Yoga, and it was a bras on, bellies out. Yeah. It's actually, it would be super rad.
Bras on, bellies out. What about bras off?
Self-confidence event.
Out.
Oh my gosh. But to be honest, if it was bras out, this is a great way to like grab people for this episode. It has nothing to do with this episode. But if it was bras out,
you count.
And every mom listening to this would probably agree with me. After having children, there is no bras off unless you want your like boob in yoga, right? Like down dog. You don't want your boob like in your face. It just doesn't sit the same way.
Yeah. I mean, mine never really sat anyway. I don't have boobs. I don't wear a bra, but I will say, I work out with a bra now, which is very different.
You have to
before. You have to.
Yeah. You have to. Especially if you're working out, because what happens is your Cooper's ligament stretches and then your breast like gets, not to use the word floppy because I don't think it's like sexy, but your breast gets like floppier. So like when you're running postpartum, yeah. Yeah. So it's good to like support your Cooper's ligament because there's no like retraining it to go back. And that's what holds your breast tight.
What's the Cooper's ligament?
So I'm not a medical expert, but it's the ligament that keeps your breast like perky. And so like to wear a bra is actually quite supportive, and it takes the stretching. It's like yoga, right? Like it takes the stretching out of the Cooper's ligament. So not that my breasts are perky by wearing a bra, but yeah. But it helps, especially like I noticed when I was postpartum and I had milk coming in and it was just my breasts were like 2 bowling balls. Like I had to double up my sports bra. So this is a great way to talk about food allergies.
I mean, really, we really know how to talk about all of it. But I need to go back to 2 sports bras. If I wore 2 sports bras when I was nursing, I would have no milk left. Just wanted to put that out there. Like,
why?
I don't know, because they would just get squished. There was like nothing coming out. So like
you could like pull milk from like a liver or like your back muscle. Like it can come from weird places in your body. It doesn't have to come from here.
Great, cool. Not gross.
You could probably like blow it out of your nose or something.
Zero grossness. No. Who are you and what do you do? Why do you do it?
So new life, right? Motherhood,
not boobs.
Social entrepreneurship.
Not topless yoga anymore.
No, not anymore. So at 7 months, my son was diagnosed with life-threatening food allergies. He had anaphylaxis to peanut butter and egg. And so it was really, I talk more about like the story of the going through grief and experiencing that and how that wasn't part of my Pinterest board, all at length on my podcast, Whole Body Health. And I also include it in my pediatric food allergy course called Fear to Freedom, which is on my website, emilynolan.com. And so if you want to hear like the more in-depth story, or if this is something that you've gone through and, you know, don't want to feel alone and have some community, that's a great place to hear more. So I ended up going through like 3 years of translational research and trying to understand, you know, I am not, this is Mama Bear, I am not going to let my kid go through life in fear and afraid to eat every meal. And part of that was me. I am not going to be afraid to give my kid a meal. And I love food, right? I just love culture. I love food. That's how a lot of social well-being is built, tradition is built. I am not going to let this dictate the quality of life for my son and for our family. And so I just went on a warpath and started, we've been to 10 allergists. I started asking really tough questions, advocating for our son, Ollie. And over the 3 years, I started asking myself questions like, there's got to be more. Because what allergists are doing is they're treating our children if they're willing to treat a child, because many of them just say abstain from the allergen, keep it out of their life. But what happens is the reactions can actually get worse.
Right.
And so if you don't do something called oral immunotherapy, which is introducing the allergen with a board-certified allergist in an allergy office, in a safe environment with epinephrine, those types of micro introductions train your immune system to tolerate that allergen. So essentially what we're trying to do is get our kid to like a bite safe place where he can go to school now, right? Because I was like, I'm going to be a homeschool teacher for the rest of my life, which is nothing I ever imagined doing. But, as a mom, you would lay your life down for your child. And so I was like, if that's what if that's what my life is, then I have to do it. And then I did it for a year and I was like, oh no, we got to find a better way. This is impossible to homeschool a 2 or 3 year old.
Torture.
Oh,
it's torture.
It's like he doesn't even listen to me.
No, he has
I'm
no
your
interest.
mother.
Yeah, I have no interest in listening to you, and it's just like too much. We did have a guest come on and talk about homeschooling and how much she enjoys it and advocates for it for people who enjoy it. So, but I relate to you, and I think that there are I think that there are a lot of different ways of doing all things. But let me tell you, I just don't have the skill. And also, I love this person. I don't want to be frustrated with you all the time.
Right.
Teachers don't have, teachers are angels, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah. And, some parents just are cut out to do it. And, as much as I could ascribe to like the mom martyr syndrome, I can do this,
Yeah.
I just intuitively was like, not for me. And I just really had to just erase judgment. I even got off social media for 8 months to try and figure out what is going on in my son's life. How do I feed him? Tune out the noise. I felt so much comparison because all of my girlfriends were feeding their kids whatever they wanted, going to any play date, going to any party. I would have to go to play dates. I remember there was a temple down the street. We went to this mommy and me play date, and there were all these toys everywhere, and all the kids just run around. And I was the one with soap and water wipes, wiping all the toys down, asking all the parents, hey, if your kid puts this in their mouth, could you put it in this basket? Not just for germs, but if they've had peanut butter before the play date, the peanut butter could get on there, and my kid hasn't had oral immunotherapy yet, and explaining and advocating. So it was a squeaky wheel always. And I still am. I think it's super important as a parent that we are brave enough to advocate. And, sometimes, not to say you're like the bad guy, but I think advocating is so important for your child, especially when they have something life-threatening.
I think advocating for your child in general is so important. I think it's just more apparent when it's life or death. I mean, I have 9 nephews and nieces. 7 of them are nephews. 7 of them are allergic to peanuts and peanut butter. And, I come from an Israeli home. So there's this idea. There's this idea like, oh, kids in Israel aren't allergic to peanuts because of the bamba, which is a snack that they serve quite often in Israel. And I'm like, guys, 4 of these kids are, Israeli kids. Like, I don't think this is a thing. And I would love for you to just speak on why you think this is going on, that you're not alone, even though this is a lonely experience, and it is a scary experience, certainly for the mother, hopefully not as much for the child. my first nephew is 15 years old yesterday, and he's not afraid. He knows exactly what to eat and what not to eat. But why is this happening to our kids? And maybe can you touch on the Bamba myth? If
I
it's a
got
myth.
you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
got you. The Bamba thing, it's not a myth.
Oh,
And there's also other things at play. So were your Israeli nephews born
no.
in the United States?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
They were, yeah. So likely they were born into a very sanitary environment. They were getting bathed every day, which when you bathe a child every day or a baby every day with soaps that strip away the lipid layer from the skin, you're creating dry skin and eczema. And food allergies are manifested or developed via skin contact first. So what's happening is the peanut is getting in through the skin lesions like eczema or dry skin. And instead of getting it into their gut first, there's more ratio of skin contact versus gut contact. And there's a hygiene hypothesis going on where they're over sanitized. The gut bacteria isn't as strong as it used to be because of generational loss and the use of antibiotics, not just in our parents, but also our grandparents when they started using antibiotics. And so all of this comes into play. And so likely what's going on is that they had skin contact over and over again, whether there's baby-led weaning, which is a philosophy or a type of feeding your child where, well, your child feeds themselves. And so we subscribe to that method when Ollie started eating solid food. We waited and followed, oh, my kid didn't have eczema. He just had baby acne. And sometimes it's really hard to tell. It's actually very hard to tell if your kid has eczema unless you're a doctor or a dermatologist and can, pinpoint what it is, because babies always have something going on and, like cradle cap and, issues where you're like, well, that's normal, I think. But, we're over sanitizing these children and over bathing them and giving them, dry skin. And then what's happening is we're not sealing their skin off with healthy skin barriers after we bathe them, right after we bathe them to protect them. So we really have two barriers on our bodies. Our first barrier to keep the world out and the environment out is our skin. And so our skin has a microbiome and we have to keep that intact, right? Like we have to keep these lipid layers intact to keep things out, these invaders out, whether they're peanut butter or dog, right?
Yeah.
Or cat or feather and or cashew or pistachio or whatever it is. And so it's all manifested via skin contact likely. And so that's probably what was going on. And so even though they had Bamba, maybe it wasn't introduced at 4 months.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I
had no idea about skin. Like my daughter has dry skin and food sensitivities. They're not allergies. They're food sensitivities. And I knew that about myself. It's so funny. I don't know what this bizarro disconnect is between like what I know about human beings, adult human beings, and what I know about small-bodied human beings. Like, what is that? Like, I have this rash here, and I'm like, I know exactly what that is. That's like candida. That's whatever. I know that it has to do with what I eat and my gut. If I have some bone broth, it goes away. I never put it together that her skin and her digestion were in a dance together. And let me just tell you, I don't bathe them that much. I just don't. I'm so glad that's okay. I'm like,
how old are they?
My daughter is 3 and my son is 5.5. How old is your son?
So Ollie's 4 now. So really, really the critical phase of like not bathing or bathing infrequently, or just spot treating certain areas, even like armpits and, genitalia, like those areas that you want to like freshen up, spot treating. It's critical in the beginning of their life because they have if they go through the birth canal and make it out the other side, not via C-section, but via vaginal birth, they swallow all of the good bacteria, which gets flushed into their gut, creating this beautiful garden microbiome. Essentially, it's like their first vaccine. It also goes on their skin. And the first thing that hospitals do when babies are born, what is it?
They wash them. Not my babies, but because I just like let them sit in the yogurt.
The vernix.
It's called vernix, yeah. I let them sit in it for a few days. It looked weird. It looked weird, but I knew it was important for them. I didn't actually know the details, and if you can explain, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I know this like zoomed out version of I wish somebody had told me, you know, that is so important for the child to keep their skin just protected with that vernix. So they're suggesting that you even keep that vernix on for 2 weeks before you bathe your child. And when you do bathe your child, it's just like water and maybe a little soap, but really just spot treating, because that soap, especially if it's one that bubbles up and is really fun and foamy and kid-friendly, marketed to you, like we get all this greenwashing going on, that starts to destroy that microbiome and that protective lipid layer in the skin. And that's when those, like, I'm not saying it's foolproof, right? But I'm saying you can prevent, you know, the ratio of prevention is way higher when you can do these kind of intuitive things that we probably did way back when, you know, I don't believe our ancestors were bathing babies as soon as they came out. They swaddled them, wiped them down. And so, you know, for the mom curious people, that is one thing that I would say, keep that tip in your pocket if you ever go into labor, to if you don't have a C-section baby. And I don't know what I would do with C-section baby. However, there is research, and functional medicine doctors, some of them will say they would actually do this. It's called vaginal seeding. So what that is if you have a C-section baby, your child's already at a deficit in terms of likely they're going to more likely develop allergies and asthma, because they didn't swallow the good bacteria going through the birth canal and have their skin washed with it. So what vaginal seeding is, and it's not FDA approved, but some functional medicine doctors say they would do it. They don't think there's any issue with it, but basically, you know, the doctor would take a swab of your like vaginal canal, the birth canal. And when the baby via C-section is born, they swab the inside of their mouth with that bacteria, and then they start swallowing it. And so at least they get some bacteria of mama's bacteria in their mouth. And they don't know, maybe the mouth is actually killing the bacteria before they even swallow it, but they're saying, what's the harm, right? They were going to have that anyway. So, you know, like, to introduce some bacteria would be better than none, maybe better than none. So there's that too. And that's something you could research if you're pregnant before you go into labor, like have a game plan. Like, if I go into C-section, am I comfortable with vaginal seeding? Am I just going to...
It's so sad that we think it's not comfortable and that it's hard to talk about. I'm just like witnessing us like squirming around vaginas. And it's like, oh, how did we get pregnant? How did most of the world get here? Like, I mean, really, this like magical canal of pleasure people.
We should just start calling it the magical canal, especially in labor. I think I would curse the magical canal. This canal is so not magical.
I know, it's not pleasurable at all. But it's funny. It's like, well, we've sanitized our bodies, and we've also even sanitized our conversation. Like, okay, you know, I was a C-section baby, my brother, my sister, my husband, his brother, his sister. Thank God for C-sections, you know? And like, gosh, if we could just embrace the real medicine of the vagina,
Right.
if we could just talk about it openly, then maybe we'd have one leg up. Like maybe then the FDA would be able to talk about it openly and approve this method that's clearly not going to harm a baby when they're born. Anyway, that's just my rant on how much I appreciate the female anatomy. I really,
Yeah.
it
Oh, yeah.
and without the fluids of the birth canal, right? You're saying, we're putting people at risk for not being able to digest properly. Isn't that incredible
Yeah.
how connected we are?
Oh, for sure. I just got back from Europe, and any mama going to Europe is like, why can't we do this in the United States? Like, mama's just sitting on the edge of Lake Como on the steps, breast out, baby here, another mama next to her, just feeding their kids, normalizing being out in public and socializing after birth with the child. I remember I was coming from a career of topless yoga, so I was the brave one, like, I don't care, and in fact, I think it's kind of nice to be brave because it creates space for other mamas to feed their child. And if I heard a baby in public screaming to eat and the mama was frantic, and like needing to feed but doesn't have a place, I would go up to the mama and say, I'll sit down with you if you'd like to nurse your child.
Yeah.
And just be there in solidarity.
Yeah.
And, to give them comfort that that's normal. But, in the United States, and I'm going to circle back to this because breastfeeding, while fed is best, if you can breastfeed, especially for the first 6 months, it is so critical to developing a strong immune system for your child.
Wow.
And you're not getting those, that bacteria and all of the nutrients in the formula. That said, formula is an amazing thing that we can give our children if we can't breastfeed. So no shame in that. It's just, like sometimes we dock points off, and then as moms, we have to figure out, okay, what's plan B, right? So if you can breastfeed, even if it's breastfeed and formula and you're mixing, it's actually, what's pretty cool is they're doing research on introduction of formula while you're breastfeeding, and they're saying many of those children with formula introduction that have dairy milk or some form of dairy protein in them aren't allergic to dairy because they're getting early introduction, which is tolerance training of that allergen at 4 months or before. And so they're developing a tolerance to that allergen. Now, what I will say is, and one thing I've discussed with Mino Lele from Lil Mixins, which is an early allergen introduction type of formula program. They're in little sachets and you mix it with real food. There's no additives or anything like that. She was saying, just there's no downside to pretending or believing your kid is high risk. In fact, everyone should just assume their child is high risk for allergies and introduce allergens at month 4. Mm-hmm. Even with baby-led weaning suggesting it's breast milk until month 6, which is what I ascribe to, and then you introduce allergens by every other week, right? So if a response comes out. All of that is old. Throw it out. What's new is you can introduce as many allergens as you want as early as you can.
Yeah.
And the reason I like her product, Lil Mixins, is you can mix it with, it's just the dehydrated powder of that allergen in the proper amount that the kid needs to get it in their gut. And you can mix it with their first avocado bite or their first sweet potato or whatever, applesauce, right? Yogurt. And if your kid is showing signs of allergy at that young age, they've had less exposure via skin contact, so they're less likely to have anaphylaxis and these extreme responses. You might see a few hives and notice, oh, he has an allergy. She is itching around the mouth, like she has an allergy, and then get treatment from there. But the earlier, the better.
Yeah. I remember my son always had like a sort of beard of red every time he'd eat tomatoes, which he loved, because actually when you're allergic to something, it sends endorphins to your brain in order to like withstand the whatever irritation is going on. He loved tomatoes. So I just kept feeding it to him because I saw he wasn't uncomfortable. He liked the taste, but he definitely was mildly allergic to it. And I think like,
Really?
yeah. And I just kept feeding it to him, and he's doesn't have that experience anymore. Now, that's anecdotal.
Right.
I would not suggest someone take this into their own hands, but that was my experience with tomatoes. I had, I was on a text chain with, a bunch of West Village mothers in New York City. And there was this really beautiful mom who texted us a photo of her child in anaphylaxis. He must have been 6 months old. She was pregnant with her second child. She's like, does anyone know what this is? And
Go to the hospital.
she went straight to the hospital. Both of her children,
Don't delay.
both of her children have life-threatening allergies. And even,
Give her my number.
yeah. Well, she actually, even through COVID, has been taking trips to the West Coast where,
I know what she's
yeah. Well, tell me more about what I'm seeing just from a sort of distant view. She takes her kids, both kids, little bodies, these sweet babies who are now in school and live a totally awesome life. She would take them in the middle of COVID to this center where they would be introduced to these allergens little by little, just as you say, which was different than my nephew. One of my nephews, we would just give him a little bit of peanut butter at home. Now, I don't know why one is at home and one is going all the way to the West Coast, but the common denominator from what I'm seeing is a little bit at a time so that they're safe, just like you say, after one bite.
Yeah.
Maybe you can like expand on what I'm noticing, because I don't have the firsthand experience.
In terms of treatment, right? Yeah. So there are a lot of centers, and there are also board certified allergists who do this. It's called oral immunotherapy. There's also something called sublingual immunotherapy. And I'll explain a little bit about it, but first I'll talk about the centers. So on the West Coast, the largest centers, there's two that are really popular. The first one is Latitude Food Allergy Center, and they have 7 centers in California, and they also just opened in New York City,
great.
Which is huge because now all of the East Coasters can go there. It's so amazing. And then there's also another one on the West Coast called SoCal Food Allergy. And that's kind of like the OG food allergy center. It's run a little bit differently than the other centers, but essentially everyone's doing the same thing. They're desensitizing the child to the food allergy or environmental allergy. SoCal treats food and environmental, but mostly they treat environmentals to support the food allergy therapy, because what's very complicated, and I won't get into it because people are probably like, this podcast is like, what is going on? There are environmentals that trigger food allergies.
Oh my God.
So if there's a lot of pollen in the air at one time, you could be allergic to this apple or to apples. But then at other times of the year, you could tolerate apples. You could have a latex allergy and a banana allergy because it's a cross-reactive protein. So it's really weird how things like that happen. And so sometimes the centers will treat the environmental and the food. They run panels, blood tests, all of that to figure it out. Latitude is food allergy specific. And then I guess they would assume your hometown allergist would treat the environmentals with either allergy shots or something called sublingual immunotherapy, which is a path that we're on. We're going to try, we plan to try something called Xolair. So Xolair is a biologic, and it's basically a shot you take. Ollie's 4 and he's like 37 pounds. So he'll take it once a month. And what this biologic does, Xolair, and what they're seeing in terms of results for food allergic and environmental allergic children, right? Ollie gets hives and anaphylaxis with tree pollen in the spring, and we have to leave our house and we go down to Miami Beach for a month just to get away from the pollen. So he's out of school for like a month because it's so bad. Which sounds great, right? Like, oh, a month in Miami Beach, how bad could it be? But it is such a stressor because it's financially stressful. It can be stressful because now I'm homeschool teacher for a month and I've got to find childcare because I'm also working. So anyway,
it's stressful also, inherently stressful because you're not going on a vacation. You're going to make sure you're
right on a
safe.
trip. On a trip.
Well, on a trip, yeah. But also the reason why is because you're going to make sure your son is safe.
Right.
I mean, it's inherently, no fun.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you have the resources to make that happen. Not everyone does, and I think that, thank God you do. Yeah. Thank God you do.
We're so blessed.
Thank God, look at you, how you take that blessing and you're sharing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been given a lot, and I feel like if I can, I do believe that medicine should be something that we give freely and information should be given freely. So for that belief, I have a podcast that has all this free information. I have full scholarships for anybody who has a needs-based need for the pediatric food allergy course. It's 100% scholarship, no questions asked. But what I was going to say is this biologic, this shot turns off the IgE response, turns off the allergy response to any allergy.
Wow.
This could be peanut butter. It could be pollen. It could be tomato, like anything, right? And it's effective. And they're seeing this there. And what we're doing now and what we're seeing in these food allergy treatment centers is oftentimes they do the Xolair injections like once a month, or it depends on the weight and age of your baby or your child. And then they do the tolerance training with it. So they're training the immune system in a safe environment because they know the body's not going to react with anaphylaxis. They can up the dosages really quickly so they can get you through oral immunotherapy, which could take years for a child to get to a maintenance dose of like, Ollie's eating 9 peanuts a day now.
Great.
Right. He was like level 5 allergy for peanut. He still is, but he's still tolerating 9 peanuts a day. 4 cashews and eggs. Like he's crushing it. But it's to basically speed up the program so that you don't have to invest all of this time into doctor's appointments. Your child's not living at the allergist office for that period of time, like 2 or 3 years. It's a long time. And it could become an identity for these kids, even for the mom. And it does often. So the Xolair speeds it up, makes it safer. And then what you can do is use it like baby gates and, eventually go with what your board certified allergist is saying, but you can back it off and like keep the allergens in the diet is what their goal is. But now your kid went through this whole thing in 7 months instead of 3 years without any reaction. And so what we're testing out, and I don't believe Ollie is a guinea pig by any stretch, but his allergist is approving Xolair, and we're starting in December and keeping it in his body so that come spring,
the pollen,
he doesn't have any allergies and he can stay in his farm school.
Oh, so, school? That's awesome.
I was crying yesterday, like, I was like, what are the contraindications? I want to know how this affects the microbiome. What's the long-term damage we're doing? And then I thought, you know what? There are some medicines that just give you the quality of life that really improve your quality of life. And I believe, and I'm not making a statement here, I may believe, that this drug, this injection can give my kid the quality of life to just be normal again. In fact, he might even be able to eat a peanut butter sandwich.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
No. And really, for us, we just want to travel. We want to go to Asia and not have a language barrier that even though I tell them my kid has food allergies that are life-threatening, but there's still a language barrier, like we don't understand, that it's life-threatening, because in Asia, the food allergies, they're different. Like in the US, we have top 9, but in Asia, there's like 6, right? That are like soy and dairy and fish and things like that, because that's what's in their diet and on their hands when they're touching their babies.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a big question, which is, you're doing all of this for your child. What are you doing for you?
Great big question.
Yeah.
Great big question. This is for me. And the last module of my pediatric food allergy course is restoring yourself and your identity as the caregiver. So it's care for caregiver. And that's a whole section that I have dedicated to that caregiver, on my blog, in my course, and on my podcast. A lot of these moms, I interviewed 992 food allergy families.
Wow.
And of that group, 75% of the moms, 75% of the moms of that group took a huge pay cut so that they could take care of their kids' health, or had to quit working completely, which most moms, when they have children, I know that, I don't know the ratio of moms that just stop working when they have children to begin with, but in this case of food allergy families, they stopped working to take care of their kids' food allergy, which was my case as well. So once you get it stabilized in a sense where, okay, we're in a routine, maybe he's not healed yet, but we're going for updosing, or we're on a nice treatment protocol, and, we're in like a more normal life. It's not so new and fresh. Then you can start restoring yourself and your identity. And for me, one of the things I did, I ended up getting somebody to come help us, like a babysitter, which I felt like was such a big deal, because, I'm available, I'm not doing anything, and I just feel so bad, and I don't have anything to do, really. Maybe I'll go shopping, I don't know. And I got a babysitter, and then behind my husband's back, I went and I booked a office space at a shared office space at a co-working facility that's 2 blocks away from our house. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to get dressed up, and I'm going to go there, and I'm just going to start working.
You're going to be a grown up.
And I'm going
to be a grown-ass woman.
I'm going to be a grown-ass woman. And I walked to my office, and that was a year and a half ago. And from that moment to this day, I have filmed an entire pediatric food allergy course and launched an entire new brand and website. I have launched a podcast to go with it. And so I have these 2 huge projects that manifested and were born because I believed that I was worth it, right? Like, just, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm just going to go out there. And I'm not saying you have to get an office space. You can go to a coffee shop.
Totally.
But for me, I'm kind of like, put your money where your mouth is. And I could do Pilates at home for $20, but I pay for the class because I know I'm going to stay for the hour.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's my personality. And so, that's what I did for myself. And I love this stuff. The reason I created this course is it's because it's the course I prayed for when Ollie was diagnosed. We had sleep training courses, we had food, how to introduce food, we had oral, like, speech therapy, and we had all these mom courses, but we didn't have one guiding us through food allergies. Right. And one from a mama, it was all information from, which is great, but it was like science driven and a little bit confusing or not applicable.
It's just so overwhelming. And like, you have a little person in your care. Like, how are you supposed to sift through all of this information and keep your cool? I mean, the other thing I like wonder is, when you're giving a child food, they could refuse it at any moment. How do we keep our nervous systems whole, intact, calm, while you're like, no, literally, I need to give you this medicine, right? Like medicine
Yeah.
is hard to give a child, right? We all know, like,
Yeah.
we're like squirting this thing in a kid's mouth. You're like, no, but really, we need the fever down or whatever it is. Every single day, you have to work towards those 9 peanuts, and you have to do it in a way where you're not, where he feels safe and loved and cared for and heard. And how do we do that when you're not? How do we do that if you're freaked out?
I have so many resources for that, Mama. So, and I'll probably have to put pins in all of these resources and come back to them because there's so much there. So
We'll link whatever you send us.
Sure. First thing, I'm a big believer in Bessel van der Kolk's work, Where the Body Keeps the Score. Trauma happens even in a 5-month-old, 6-month-old, 7-month-old, 9-month-old, 1-year-old child who has anaphylaxis. That is still in that child's body, that trauma. And so part of the work that I do is bringing complementary care to light. And so we do acupressure for children. I bring all types of resources to help lower physiological stress levels in the child who has experienced trauma, whether like food allergy trauma, right? Which is trauma, including the mama. So I actually went to acupuncture with my son.
Yeah. Oh.
I got acupuncture. And so I'm lowering my physiological stress level. Now, I have 2 podcast episodes. One is a well-trained emergency mindset where I interview an EMT and an ISR instructor. It's an infant swim resource instructor. And I talked to her. She's also a firefighter. And I talked to her about how do you stay cool in an emergency so that you can keep your heart rate down and so that your child can mimic you, because what we're seeing is in a food allergy response, if you can lower the heart rate, you may lessen the response. If you increase the heart rate, whether it's freaking out, panicking, running around, itchy mouth,
which is understandable. Which is understandable. It's not helpful.
And totally normal.
Makes a lot of sense. Definitely not going to bring you closer to the freedom from the fear, but also human.
Totally. And the normal response, right? Like, but if you practice and train yourself and have confidence that, oh, science has told me I can think more clearly when I stay calm. And when you can think clearly, you can think of options. You can communicate better with the emergency response team, with your partner. I need epinephrine now. Go get it. It's in the top cabinet above the microwave. Staying calm can help the child and yourself in so many ways. It's so much more beneficial. So we have those resources. I also offer a resource from my favorite yoga instructor, one of my favorites, Tara Stiles. Yeah. And the episode is called Softening. Excuse me. It talks about being able to soften yourself and relax in the day-to-day moments and practice that so that it is more of a response when there has more anxious moments in your life or, stressful moments, that you can practice. Oh, my breath is right there. Just simple, right? Or just moving from the middle and just ease and softening. And, we are mamas and we're always in fight or flight, but just to be brave enough to soften, especially in a time when culture says, you should be anxious all the time. You should have your EpiPen on you all the time. And you should, never feed that kid peanuts or it's like, I have my EpiPen. I know how to use it. We're good. We're safe. And so we offer these lowering physiological stress levels, which also impact the microbiome. We're seeing so much more benefit in the children's microbiome, in their immune systems, feeling safe, feeling less stress. So that's an option. And I know I have like a million more options.
So share it with us, and we'll be there. Yeah. I think it's so important. I think for parents, caregivers in general, it's such an important reminder that little nervous systems can't regulate against a dysregulated system, that we set the tone. And that is hard to do when we're afraid. And it makes sense that we're afraid in fearful situations. And so the first step is to hold compassion for ourselves, but also to seek out the guidance, the fact that you created the guidance system you needed. How amazing is that? How incredible that, like, not only is it that Ollie gets to go to school, but you get to go, was it Italy? Where did you go?
For 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. I had my emergency action plan ready. My mom had the legal caregiver documents to bring to school that said I'm in charge of Oliver, and I had signed off on it. And the pediatric food allergy course gives you all of these documents. I just wanted to take everything off the plate of that mama who's like overwhelmed and anxious and say, here it is. Come back to this anytime you need it, and it's available to you. And let me just make it easy for you, because I had to give up 3.5 years of my life for this.
But was it training in the end? You gave it up. You surrendered to that experience. You read all the books. You had hands-on learning with your child. I mean, and now you're sharing it. So what was it really giving up? I don't know.
Well, I think in this case, it's more of a social entrepreneurship venture and purpose, turning pain to purpose, and me being able to connect with other moms, which is my favorite thing to do, is communicating and building relationships. But I do think that not every mom, in the same case that we're not cut out for homeschooling, not every mom is going to want to like give up her job, or especially if it's something she loves, right? Or an identity that she enjoys being after she drops her kid off at daycare or preschool or whatever, even at grandma's, right? Like was what I did when we were in Italy.
I love grandma. Go grandma.
Grandmas are the best. We moved a block away to be a block away from my grandma. Yeah, from my mom.
That's right.
So that she could be a part of Ollie's life, and so we could get the extra support we needed. Yeah.
What were you going to say? You were going to say something?
No, I mean, it's just, it's everything, right? It's pain to purpose, if you want to be cliche about it. But it's, for me, I love health and wellness. I was in health and wellness in my prior life, right? And talked about body positivity. And so I'm really just transferring those skills and advocacy of radical acceptance of your body into something more, broader. Food allergies, radically accepting this is the diagnosis. Okay, now how do I deal with this? And how do we integrate protocol and safety procedures into our life to protect our family and to help with therapy? And so it's applying the same skill set, and I'm just loving it. I'm loving it. So I got lucky, and hopefully every other mama gets to keep the job that they love or find a job that they love, because this creates space and time for them.
Amen. And hopefully we could take 2 weeks in Italy knowing that our little ones are cared for, safe, happy, and that our bodies and our minds and our relationships and our life mean something. Counts. Is important, actually. Because how much more available were you on the other end of that experience?
That's a good question. I talk about that in my episode with Hillary Toll Carter, who's also a food allergy mama. And I said, oh my gosh, I forgot I had a husband.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
I knew it, right? But after 3 years of being a full-time caregiver to a child who is really medically codependent, and you are just spearheading all the therapy, and you're making those appointments twice a week or however often you're there, and you're the one driving, and it's like, oh my gosh, what about this relationship? Like, there's many relationships going on in this house, and we love our child, but we also love each other. And that was really important. Very important. And Hillary and I talked about it in the episode, and how we both have seen, she talks about seeing a therapist. I don't know if she does it with her husband, but my husband and I see a positive psychologist, life coach, and we talk about, we haven't since Italy, but we try and make it a habit of just checking in with each other, and it's been so helpful.
Again, that support. I have like when in my 20s, I did the 12 steps for eating, disordered eating. And the first step is just admitting that there's an issue, right? So that radical acceptance. But, step 2, I think, is getting support, relying on either a power greater than yourself, but also that power can be grandma, a friend, etc. But we need support. And I'm just so grateful that you're offering the support that these food allergy mamas need very, very badly. And I was wondering if you could tell us where we can find more of you. I know we're going to do some links in the show notes of this episode, but there's clearly more where this came from. And I know people will want to follow up.
Well, you can find me right now in my sound booth in the office that I started paying for despite my husband's concern for me going and getting a private office, but look what I've created because of it. So anyway, so you can find me on emilynolan.com. All of my podcasts are housed there. If they're on all the platforms as well, for Whole Body Health with Emily Nolan. My pediatric food allergy course entitled Fear to Freedom is on the website. It's very easy to find. And I also have a pediatric essentials resource, food allergy essentials resource at the bottom of the website. If you're not ready to fully commit to the food allergy course, I have an essentials package it's full of all the stuff you need from the get-go when your kid is diagnosed with food allergies. I specialize in children 4 months to 4 years old, really on the front end of food allergies, to hopefully help that mama with therapy and training, tolerance training, to get their kid into a place where they are bite safe is something I would love to see. I know some food allergies, less common food allergies, you can't do those tolerance trainings, but children may grow out of those types of allergies, and they're also not life-threatening. Some of those, like EOE, which is eosinophilic esophagitis, is something it took me years to understand. FPIES, EGID, just different acronyms of different types of allergies. So anyway, emilynolan.com, and my Instagram is I am Emily Nolan. So pretty simple. And I would love to hear from you.
I'm wondering what your hope for whoever's going to reach out to you. Like, what is your vision for this one person, even if it's just one person who's listening to this podcast all the way through? What might you tell her or him? Or them?
Oh, don't be afraid. I think my biggest fear of if I were to ever have a second kid is that they would have food allergies and I couldn't handle it. And for the mom curious, there are so many things you can do and we know of doing to prevent food allergies. And, I survived. My child survived. We learned a lot. And in fact, it was a silver lining learning how to advocate for him at such a young age. It was very hard. You are not alone. And if it's not food allergies, it's something else, not to scare you away from, being a mother, but it's something else. And so just go with the flow, roll with the punches, focus on positive psychology, get support and help before it's an issue. And, use resources and find resources like the pediatric food allergy course, like sleep training, like, anything that makes it easy for you. Just, do it and tune out the noise. And that would be my hope, is that you're not afraid to pursue motherhood, but that motherhood would be a choice, that a brave choice that you would make, because you're not afraid, because you can handle it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.